Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Politdigm podcast. My name is Red, and surprisingly enough, today I am not joined by my co-host Alpha. Some say that Alpha is currently on the run. Some say that he is, in my walls. But we won't know until next week when he comes back because, unfortunately, as we mentioned various times, and if you watched the last episode, you know that if 2 weeks ago something similar happened, but this time was only to him. We've just been busy. We've been very busy. Fortunately enough, I have been less busy these last. I mean, I've been very busy too, but I've been able to get my schoolwork done efficiently, and so I've had the opportunity to work on an article and now the podcast, but unfortunately Alpha just could not be here today. He is currently stressing the fuck out about school, so I had to do this on my own today. But hopefully next week he'll be back, I believe. So there will be no reason for him to not be here. But this week I am here by myself. However, before the episode starts, as always, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to support us over on Patreon. If you can support us on Patreon, make sure to check out our website to know how you can support us in alternative non-monetary ways. And a little secret between me and you, honestly, I would much prefer those non-monetary ways because money is money and help is help, and money isn't everything. Sorry, that's what I meant. And of course, also make sure to join our Discord server. It's open, anybody can join. However, if you also happen to support us over on Patreon, you'll get access to our podcast Q&A, because at the end of each podcast episode, we will try to answer your questions, which you have submitted to the best of our abilities. However, we haven't gotten any questions today or lately, so that won't be happening today, but you could be the next one. Who knows? And of course, also make sure to follow us on social media, where we will keep you up to date with emergencies or the latest Politdigm news. In this case, no, we did not warn you about this happening, about me recording the episode alone today. Why? Because I only knew this was going to happen like an hour or two ago, so I didn't exactly have time to prepare. So it wasn't something that I was aware that it's going to happen. So it was a very last minute thing, and whatever. We're still going to be posting, and the moment somebody starts watching this video, you'll find out. You'll know that it happened because it's the first thing I say. Anyways, let's get into the actual article that I wrote. I chose to write an article which is technically speaking a part 2 from last week, because in the last Politdigm podcast episode, me and Alpha had mostly two moments where it's not that we didn't agree, is that we just had a bit of friction, and I think it was mostly due to a miscommunication and my lack of ability of being able to correctly express what exactly I meant. One was right at the beginning, very much at the beginning of the episode, where I pretty much said that the only sort of rights and achievements that we have today when it comes to, human rights, workers' rights, rights in general, have been due to pressure which the left has put on the right, and that the right basically seceded, I think that's the correct word, basically gave up, quote unquote, and gave us those rights because it was just handier or handy for them to do so. Alpha didn't understand that, or maybe didn't interpret what I was saying as I meant it to be saying, because then he said something which, to be honest, I didn't really understand, and then I talked to him afterwards about it, and it's clear that he knows what I'm talking about, so I don't know why there was a miscommunication there. However, I still decided to clarify exactly what I meant, and in the article I go very in depth into that exact topic, because I try to basically paint a picture, right? After, for example, let's say after World War II, right? After the since the second half of the 20th century, the entire Western global North, also known as the West, has been dominated by neoliberalism. And well, first it was liberalism, then after Reagan and Thatcher, it was neoliberalism, because they created an even worse liberalism somehow. And yes, there are countries which don't typically fit that neoliberal framework, and in many ways, I guess, would be or closer to the original liberal ideas rather than the neoliberal ones, but they're still capitalist ideas. I start off by showcasing these neoliberal ideas, and I talk about one of the most important things regarding neoliberalism when it comes to its social impact, which is the hyper-individualism that it basically sells, right? This idea that everybody is can be a self-made man, and that they can also be the next richest person. This is a neoliberal idea. It's a sort of facelift, if you want to call it that, a refurbished version of the American dream, but now a very individualistic American dream. And when neoliberalism does this, this has several effects, because hyper-individualism is, in my opinion, and I'd say in a lot of people's opinions, is probably one of the worst things to have happened to us in a long time. Of course, there has been individualism for a long time. I'd say that the higher classes, usually, the feudal lords or the bourgeoisie, have always had a lot of individualism in some cases, or at least a lot of like sectioning themselves off and not having a community per se. But at least us, the workers or the serfs, or the slaves, have always been in a community because we had one thing in common, which was our misery, our class struggle, and that always brought us together. However, neoliberalism was born during the the Cold War, and one of the many things of the Cold War was the Red Scare propaganda. This propaganda which basically sold you the idea that, oh, communism bad, anything related to communism is bad, anything that's on the left is bad, and there is no room for anything different than the left, etc., etc., or anything different than the right. That's what I meant. No, the right is the right way to go, pun intended. And the reality is that one of the main things about communism or the communist ideals is, of course, it's in the name. It's community, the commune, right? So in basically wanting to make sure that leftist movements are weaker, we as in humans, but the neoliberals, the Reagans of the world, basically came up with the idea of hyper-individualism. And hyper-individualism has one unique key, characteristic, which is separating us as much as you can. And why? And because of the divide and conquer strategy, right? For as long as we're all divided, it is much easier to conquer us. And it's also not just that. There's another reason, which I guess I didn't mention in the article directly, but I definitely put that idea forward, which is that if we can't form communities, if we can't come together in collective action, which is leftist movements usually collective action. I can't really think of a non-collective action leftist movement, or a leftist movement that doesn't have the idea of collective action, a group of people coming together and fighting for the same cause. If you can keep people from grouping up, if you can keep people from forming like deep ties in a community, and and creating these deeply intertwined communities which have very revolutionary ideas and want to fight against capitalism, you instantly have a massive advantage, and you instantly are able to make sure that there are much less anti-capitalist movements than if you were able to make people come together. And look at the US, right? That's a good example. Although, of course, there are always communities where that doesn't work, and those are usually very underprivileged communities, because they don't give a shit about neoliberalism. They don't believe in the American dream. They have been so screwed over their entire lives, which that type of idea is not enough. However, those communities then struggle from another thing, because this hyper individualistic tendency has other repercussions, which is also, for example, identity politics. For those who don't know what identity politics is, goddamn. It's basically the idea of focusing specifically on one identity, and one identity can both be literally like a person's identity or another thing, but a one topic issue. Like, let's say you are a huge climate activist, right? You only care about that, and you only focus about that, and all you want is to, for example, stop. Sorry, I don't know why I said it that way. You only are against and want to deeply stop fossil fuels, right? And you want alternative energies and sustainable energies. But that's it. That's nothing else. Or, for example, you are a huge LGBTQ ally, or you yourself are a member of the LGBTQ community, and you're constantly fighting for queer rights. And that's it. You might be part of parades, of rallies, and be there. We want rights. We want rights. And you have all the right to do, and you should do that. But that's it. You're not doing anything else. Or same thing with, for example, fighting for women's rights, or fighting for, or in Black Lives Matter, or these different things. These are all very noble movements. But a lot of these movements, and I'm generalizing here, but the reality is that most of these movements aren't attacking, aren't pointing at the system that allows these issues to occur in the first place. And the system, which might not have been the system that created these issues, but a system that definitely lets them live on from previous systems. And we've talked about this in a previous episode, an episode I hosted, where it perpetuates these issues. Let's take, for example, queer rights. Queer rights have to do with the creation and the sustain of the patriarchy. Same thing with feminism, which, funnily enough, for those who have never thought about it, just think about the idea that the women's rights and queer rights violations, or the lack thereof of those rights, originate from the exact same issue, which is the creation of the patriarchy and the subjugation and objectification and the general sort of putting people into two boxes and making one of the boxes the man allegedly superior than the women, and boom, in doing that you have created two issues. One, you're assuming there's only men and women, which there isn't. You created issues towards the queer people, to the queer community, I meant. And you are also now putting people into two boxes, and you're saying one is superior than the other, and boom, you have women's, you have misogyny, sexism, et cetera, et cetera. So, there you go. That's an issue. And the patriarchy is a tool that is used by capitalism to ensure that private property is protected, because of inheritance, and because of just general, keeping, the money flowing up and flowing to the already rich white men. So just that example, right? Just the example of sexism and queerphobia, for example, are two issues which stem from capitalism and are sustained by said system. So identity politics is just that. It is basically a what I call it, a sort of, I'm missing the term. I miss Alpha. He would help me out here. A distraction, I would say. And when I say distraction, I don't mean that, these issues regarding these identities or regarding these people aren't important. Quite the opposite. The issue is that all of these issues are interconnected, and we shouldn't fight them isolated. We should all bring all these people together, all these movements together, and we should all teach them and say, hey, look, ape together strong, as I've said before in a different episode, monkey together strong. We fight together against the capitalists. And if we all, if we group up together, if these movements, which at the end of the day, all they want is to fight for human rights, and even fighting for climate, for against climate change is fighting for human rights, because we have the right to a planet that is livable. So all these movements have one thing in common, which is that they should be rooted in anti-capitalist ideas. But they aren't. Most of them aren't. Yes, there are examples. For example, Greta Thunberg. I think that's the correct last name, right? Yeah, I think so. She, was always laughed at as like, oh, this crazy teenager which cares about the climate, and was never taken seriously. But since she's taken a anti-capitalist stance and she has been openly anti-capitalist, suddenly she's a much scarier person. I mean, she's also an adult now, and she got arrested, I think, like a few days ago because of being pro-Palestinian. And that's something, that's a big deal for finally somebody that's, as important as her, having taken a step and realizing that, oh shit, the problem is not just climate change. This climate change issue, yes, stems from, us having bad practices in production and stuff like that. But why does that production happen in the first place? And I guess she dug deeper and realized, oh, the problem is capitalism. The problem is the system that we live in. And so why does identity politics exist? Well, for the simple reason, goddamn, I'm struggling with English today. That is that, again, it's divide and conquer. It's much easier to divide us into smaller communities fighting for our own rights separately, and not allowing us to get together and fight for our collective rights, our human rights. And in many cases, even right-wing politicians try to, let us do infighting. For example, TERFs, right? Trans exclusionary radical feminists is a example of infighting. Technically speaking, these are people who allegedly are fighting for women's rights. Although, when it comes to radical feminists, usually they're trying to create a matriarchy, essentially, like a system where the women are on top, and that's not the point of feminism. At the end of the day, the point of feminism is not to create a matriarchy; it's to destroy the patriarchy and create a society where there is no ruling gender. And so that's an instant L. But then there's also the aspect of, hey, look, these people are trans exclusionary. They don't consider trans people to be valid, and specifically, usually trans women to be women. And that's bullshit. What the fuck are you doing? That is such a dumb idea. And usually these TERFs have the most ridiculous explanations and sort of justifications to why you're trans exclusionary. Like one that I love giving this example. I remember a few years ago, I don't remember what exactly this was a reaction to, but it was basically a trans exclusionary radical feminist, a TERF, reacting to trans women in sports. And this TERF specifically used to, or does allegedly say that women are as capable as men in sports and in life in general. And sure, I can agree with that. There's no, there's objectively speaking, I don't care who is better or not. It doesn't matter. It's not important for the day-to-day life and social and humanity's existence whether one sex is better than the other at doing sports or it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It's not important to the day-to-day. There's more important shit, right? There's people dying of hunger. I don't care about sports. But the reality is that they said, hey, look, women are as capable as men in sports. But then, but women, trans women, who, in their eyes, are men, can't compete in women's sports because they have an unfair advantage. So let's break that down. A trans woman who, allegedly, in their eyes, is a man. So let's say that. So in their eyes, it's not a trans woman, it's a man. This man has a unfair advantage over other women in sports. So where do we stand? Do men have an advantage over sports than women, or do they not? Where like it's hypocritical. It's not supposed to make sense. Don't there's no point in looking into it, because these turf ideals are not based off of logic. They're based off of reactionary dumbassery. I digress. Let's move on, or go back to what I was talking about when it comes to identity politics. These or in the divide and conquer strategy, that's what I meant to go back to. This is something that neoliberalism has done perfectly. Unfortunately, it has. It has divided and conquered us. It consistently tries to make sure that we cannot band together, and that we cannot collectively realize that, oh shit, if we band together, there's nothing they can do. They can't kill all of us, even if they use the police and the military in the most gruesome and oppressive ways. There's no way they can kill all of us, because we're the 99%, right? We are the workers. We are the people. We're not the 1%. And that's how neoliberalism has done it. But that's not the only form of sort of the undermining or making sure that leftist movements can't rise, because that's the whole point of what I've been trying to make, is that, look, these are actively, these are steps which are taken to make sure that leftist movements can't thrive. Yes, there are still leftist movements. BLM in its origins is a leftist movement. The queer emancipation women's emancipation and queer rights is a leftist movement. But if we are together, it's a stronger leftist movement. And they would rather have weak, very disembodied movements, rather than having a grouped up, strong leftist movement. So they, again, divide and conquer. Simple as that. But there's another system, a system which still falls under the capitalist umbrella, but is not quite neoliberalism. Yes, it has some aspects of it, but it's different, which is social democracies. When it came to social democracies, I use the example of Scandinavia, which is generally known as the best example of social democracies. And why did I use this example? Why did I use Scandinavia? Because when it comes to Scandinavia, they have something interesting. Because if you don't know, and if I don't remember if I've talked about this before, I think I might have, social democracies have one interesting aspect. They try to create a perfect balance between social welfare and social well-being and capitalist success. For those who have studied capitalism or have listened to our podcasts about specifically capitalism that we did a few weeks ago, you would know that capitalism is incapable to do this, because there's something which is the basis of the creation of capitalism, which is a inherent contradiction, which is the interest of the workers versus the interest of the capital owners. This is an inherent, unstoppable contradiction. And so how do you mitigate this issue? You export, or what's the term I used in the article? Let me look. I don't remember what the exact term I used, but it was a different, not export. It was you outsource. That's the word. You outsource the misery. What do I mean by that? So capitalism, for it to function, for it to have this inherent contradiction live, because it must for capitalism to exist, it has an option, which is that this misery, this class struggle that is brought upon by this contradiction does not have to be domestically. Because if you outsource the misery, the capitalist misery, to, let's say, the global south, the country, your country in the global north, can reap the money, the resources, the capital created by the global south, and try to distribute it, there you go, to your people in a relatively, I wouldn't say equal, but a more reasonable manner. This is why people oftenly mistake social democracy or social democratic ideas with socialism, because socialism, of course, has the idea of, of equally distributing wealth throughout the workers and the population in general. But that is a huge difference, because socialism doesn't want to outsource its misery to another country. It doesn't. And that's the difference, because for a social democratic country to succeed and have all the riches that it has, somewhere in the global south, some country is under neocolonial rule. And that's not okay. Simply put, that is not okay. Because if neither the people in your country nor in any other country should suffer for the well-being of your people, if your people shouldn't suffer in your country, neither should anybody else in any other country, much less for your well-being. It's not, you're not going to assume that even in a socialist country, in a perfect socialist country, there wouldn't be other countries which are suffering. Of course there would, but that country should not be suffering for your success, because that's not socialism. That's a social democracy. That is not a leftist movement. That is a centrist sort of in-between fence-sitting idea, which wants a sort of fake socialism in your country, but then in another country they're doing horrible neocolonial capitalism. So no, that's not socialism. Don't pretend it is. And what side effect does this cause? This causes a interesting side effect, which is that in Scandinavia itself, I won't say so much as recently, because of there of course, just like most other countries in Europe, there's been a lot of immigrants that have been coming to Scandinavia, and they're like any other European country, they're as equally racist as we are, and so they have been feeling unhappy with the amount of immigrants that are in their country, and so that has turned them more to the right, to have anti-immigration sentiments and racist, xenophobic ideas. But generally speaking, for the last, not sure, I can't really give a timetable, a time moment. I can't remember the term, a snippet of time exactly to say when that has been happening. But in general, Scandinavia, and this is, of course, in general in Europe and throughout the world, how they have been known as is this, people who have great education. As of currently, they have an immense amount of electric cars. They're super eco-friendly. They're super progressive and so much more forward thinking than the rest of Europe. And they're always on the brink. They're always one step ahead of us, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true. But they do that while sacrificing other people. Is that to say that other European countries don't do that? No, we also do that. But to them, it makes them look 100%, or not 100%, but way more hypocritical, because they want to be so eco-friendly and so progressive, and then boom, you're doing neocolonialism at an insane rate. So what does this cause? Which is what I was trying to say, and then I kind of got sidetracked. But what this causes is a general social conditioning, or a social or a material conditions, let's put it that way. That's the more correct term. This creates material conditions to where the people in a Scandinavian country aren't particularly bothered with the social issues that happen in other countries, because they do have way better healthcare. They do have better educations. They have all these issues, which are usually those caused by capitalism, those usually caused by, or usually those which cause the creation of leftist movements. So what you've got is an equally, exploitative system, because social democracies are still capitalist. Just, again, they outsource the misery, so they're still causing misery, not in their own country, in another place in the world. So that's not solving any issue. But the people in the country, those who have the power, technically speaking, to fight said oppression in the global south, won't do it. because they have absolutely no motive to, because they, in their eyes, have awesome living conditions and have absolutely no motivation to go against this system, which has not really screwed them over as much as, other countries have. Is that to say that it's perfect? No, of course not. Again, I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it one more time. There's still a country in the global south which is being exploited. So that's not good, because if every country became social democratic or social democracy, the global south would suffer tremendously to levels which you've never seen before, and that's not stable. That's not a sustainable an economy. That's not sustainable anyways, because then there would be probably revolutions in global south. There would be massive leftist movements in the global south, which is also isn't great for the global north, because if they want to keep capitalism alive, then we also can cause leftist ideas to pop up in the global south. Don't do that. So that is an example where, again, a capitalist movement is trying to suppress, that's the correct term, any leftist movement from appearing. And so we come to one conclusion, right? And that's not the conclusion of the article. This is just the conclusion of this section of the article, which is that yet all these movements, whilst operating differently, have all one thing in common, which is that they're capitalist and that they have systems in place, regulations even, or just reflexes to make sure that anti-capitalist movements cannot rise, aka leftist movements. And so that is not great. That is not a good thing, because that is how capitalism stays alive. That is how the general human suffering stays alive, which to some people should only, motivate them more to be part of leftist movements. But as Marxist theory will put it, it all comes down to the material conditions, and the material conditions are those which, dictate who you are and how you act, et cetera, because, it's the material world around you which influences your every moment of existence. And if the material conditions that you live in simply have never allowed you to, have not even let you have a glimpse of what a leftist movement is, what an alternative to capitalism is, you will probably never develop those ideas. Of course, today with the internet, that is harder. And that is why, for example, I created Politdigm, is to make that harder, to suppress leftist movements. But it's still complicated. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic of the article, because now I have to present another idea, which is what I started with the last episode with, which is the pressure, the leftists versus the rightists, or the right-wing movements. Because I said that the only successes which the left has had have been due to pressure, due to immense pressure. And I still understand why Alpha didn't get what I meant. Maybe I wasn't clear. I'm willing to take the L. That might have been on me. I'll fully take the blame if I have to. But the reality is that over and over again, things like shorter work hours in the workplace, women's rights, queer rights, people of color's rights, general human rights have been due to leftist movements putting pressure on the current right-wing establishment. When I mean pressure, what do I mean by that? There's several different types of pressure. There can be political pressure, as in a leftist government or a leftist party being elected, and therefore in parliament, for example, can put pressure on the right-wing governments, and therefore, in parliament it's slightly different, because if you have a leftist majority, the parties can, form a coalition and pass a law, et cetera, But these are, forms of pressure. These are forms of coming together and saying, no, we'll be doing our own thing. And if you don't listen to us, we'll go against you and we'll win. And that's what I meant by the last episode. Maybe I didn't make that clear. But let's look, for example, I put some examples like the abolition of slavery, humans, suffrage, and suffrage. I never remember the correct. I think it's suffrage, but it's the French movement, the suffragettes. That's what I was trying to get at. And then the civil rights movement, of course. These are, I guess, probably the more known ones. There's also the Stonewall movement, which is due to queer rights. I believe that's the correct name of it. I hope I got it right, but it's the one with Marsha P. Johnson. So there's a lot of different movements, and these are moments where the left has come together and put their foot down and say, hey, no, fuck you. We want rights and you will give them to us. And the right, usually when being faced with these movements, they have to act, right? They have to do something. They can act in violence. They can try to silence us with death, with arresting us, with, doing all that. Or which is the better alternative compared to that one, is that they basically, just are like, all right, they take a step back and they go, all right, we'll give you the rights. We'll do it. However, something to keep in mind is that they're not doing this out the kindness of their heart. They're not. And I've said this before in the episode that I did about the patriarchy. Because they're not, for example, women's rights for the workplace, or women in the workplace didn't happen because capitalists were like, oh, okay, all right, we'll let them have it. We've changed our minds. We're suddenly feminists now. No, that did not happen because of it. Yes, it happened, surely, because feminists put pressure on and they said they wanted rights, and then right-wing movements or the right-wing governments, the capitalist governments, go into sort of a crisis mode where they're trying to figure out what they'll do. How do we solve this problem? Because in their eyes, this is a huge problem. These people are, they're on strike. They're causing, they're causing outrage. People are either supporting them or they're against them, and this creating a divide. This is radicalizing people. This is, this movement, if they're strong, they can go against this. This is a threat. They see leftist movements as a threat. And so how do we solve this threat? Do we do violence, or do we, try to get some sort of agreement, a sort of midterm solution, sort of a middle ground, right? And so it is this way that capitalist movements, that capitalist governments have throughout history consistently given us, benefits, rights in general. And it's never because they felt like it. It's because they would rather give them to us than face a revolutionary movement. Because let's think about it, right? Let me give you an example, right? Something which I don't remember where this phrase is from, but I remember seeing this years and years ago, and I've always this is a phrase that has always stuck to my mind, which is that the reason why we humans are so afraid of robots and aliens, for example, or let's say mostly aliens, is because we are afraid that those aliens will treat us like we treat the other animals on our planet, as lesser beings, as food, as something, as a shit under my boot. And that is an idea that's stuck with me. This idea that, this group, this general group, this group in power, is afraid that another group will use the same tactics that they use against them. And let's use that example with the case of the capitalist governments, the bourgeoisie, right? The bourgeoisie uses the state to enforce their power, the police, the military, violence. They use violence against us to make sure that the bourgeoisie stays on top, to make sure that the capitalists can keep their power. But they are scared shitless that a large leftist movement would form and also use violence against them, use their violence against them. And we've talked about this in a previous episode. Nobody wants, no leftist, no real insane leftist wants to cause violence. Violence is always a last means. It's the last thing you should ever do. And so, of course, in most cases, leftists always try to refrain from using violence. And I think that the capitalists know this, that the governments know this, that the right-wing governments know this. And so they're like, all right, you don't want to do violence. We don't want to do violence on you. So we'll come up with this half-ass solution, which won't fix your problem, will, however, keep you from being as angry as you were. You'll be happy for maybe a decade, for 5 years, for however long it will be. You'll be happy for a while. You won't be able to radicalize more people against us. You won't be able to have a stronger movement, and we can all just pretend that the issue was solved. And that's what they do. That's what they did with slavery. Slavery still exists in the US under different forms, but it still does. Let's use example. I think it's the 14th or 13th Amendment. I never know which one it is. I think it's the 13th Amendment, which says that slavery is legal as long as it's done by somebody who's broken the law. That's slavery. That's horrible. That's what the Americans consistently say that the USSR did, which was awful, and it was, which is the gulags. They have gulags. For fuck's sake, they have slavery in prisons, and this is a known thing. Have you ever questioned why there's such a high incarceration rate in the US? Is because they can get fucking free labor from the prisoners. Yeah, that's fucking horrendous. And so, taking that in mind, saying that, slavery was abolished, it wasn't. It's just changed, because we don't need just to abolish slavery. You need to first abolish slavery in general, which it wasn't. That's step one. Step two, you can't just abolish slavery. You then have to do, you have to actually make up for the thing you did. You need to do, God, I never remember the term. You need to mend, you have to, invest in these communities. You need to, reparation. You need to do reparations. For example, what Germany did after World War II. You have to make up for the huge errors you made. You can't just go, hey, I was wrong, and then move on. No, you need to, you have to admit you were wrong and now fix the problem you created. But they never did that. So that was just a half-assed solution to say, yes, we got rid of slavery. Yeah, but the American political system, the entire governance of America is still based off of that system, which had slavery, and it's still racist as all fuck. And in the same vein, people think that after the civil rights movement, that somehow racism never stopped existing. My ass. The system, capitalism, is racist in nature. It thrives with racism. It needs it to survive. Again, the divide and conquer, outsourcing the misery to other countries, etc., etc. There's, capitalism thrives off of this shit. So saying that, because of the civil rights movement, suddenly the capitalist American system stopped being racist is pathetic. That is simply not how it is. So, to go back to the last episode, me and Alpha talked about small victories, about these small victories which we keep having, which are great. At the end of the day, these are still good things. It's not to say that, I would rather not have them at all. No, they created better conditions. People are happier, but people aren't happy. People haven't had their problems solved. They've just been slightly made less worse, or have changed slightly, because sure, maybe women are now in the workplace, but they have absolutely no time to spend with their families. And now children have no present parents. So children are now basically on their own, which is also not good because they need a loving parents. And I'm not saying, no, the women need to stay at home. No, they need 2 or more loving parents. They need support from their whole family. all family. And so, having everybody slaving away at their wages means that there's a bunch of children which are unintended, which is a massive issue. So yes, we got women in the workplace, but that created a whole new, bunch of problems. So these small victories aren't solving the larger issue. The larger issue is capitalism. It is the system which allows all these issues to keep existing, which will always keep us unhappy. That's what I tried to say last week, but I didn't really do a good job at it. And the reality is that these small victories are usually used to distract us, to keep us from realizing that, hey, look, capitalism is the problem. It's not that these problems just exist in a vacuum and that we can solve them in a vacuum. You can't. You can't solve issues in a vacuum. You have to go to the source of the issue. You can't just solve them in a vacuum. And the reality is that I've been talking about all these issues, but even some of these issues, which supposedly have been solved, then end up being unsolved or come back, like Roe v. Wade, abortion, the protection to the right of abortion was overturned. And that is the moment where a leftist movement who fought for Roe v. Wade was just removed as if it never happened. So it proves that, yes, these small wins can be good, but they're not permanent. They're temporary. And at any point, if the stars align for the capitalists, they will try to undo them, to go back to how it was before, because that it doesn't benefit them in any way. If they see that they have an ability to do so and to, without people, starting an uprising, they will do it. They're willing to do it. And that's just an example. For example, last week, Alpha, for example, talked about how France had turned abortion into a constitutional right. And that's great. That's awesome. But they also still have tremendous social and economic issues. And I believe, if I'm correct, their current education minister is a tremendously transphobic guy. And so, sure, wow, you got abortion in your constitution. That's great. But how about the rest, buddy? You're not going to solve the rest. And that's a problem. And it's these small things which keep people from realizing that, hey, look, this is a bigger issue. This is a bigger issue which we need to solve. And that's fucking bad. That's not good. And is that to say that, should we stop fighting for these small movements because they have no meaning? No, absolutely not. But we shouldn't stop there. However, before I keep that thought going, I have to speed up because I'm a little behind on the time. It's already been almost 50 minutes, and I'm halfway through the article. But anyways, my next topic is, did the left fall asleep or what? What's been happening? What the fuck is going on? Because that's a good point. Clearly there's been, what is the left doing? Are we dumb? Like, are we not doing anything? Like in Portugal, today is Thursday. On Sunday, we had elections, and the right had a majority vote in parliament. The left lost. What the fuck is going on? There's clearly a lack of power in the left right now. And when I mean power, I don't mean like political power. I mean power, just energy, life, existence. It's dwindled. And I attribute this to several factors. One is something that I, for example, read on Politdigm Reads. Go check that out. Go check out the series of reading Techno-Feudalism, where Yanis, the author, talks about how after 1991, after the fall of the USSR, that was a massive loss for the left, and that was a massive loss for socialist movements. And then after that, things changed. And it's true, throughout the years, and I'd say maybe probably since around that time, there has been a clear kind of slowing down of leftist movements, and there's suddenly been a rise of right-wing and ultra right-wing ideas, which is scary. In fact, we've talked. Me and Alpha have written what, like 3 articles about this now, and the rise of right wing ideas in Europe and throughout the world. We've never had this much fascism in Europe since the 30s and the 40s. It's horrible. We have so many people who are willingly and openly doing fascist, Nazi salutes, openly admitting that they're fascists, openly siding with the Nazis. This is horrible. This is a massive issue. This is to me, and I can't help but feel like this is a massive failure from the left. That the left, as much as I'm a leftist, I felt like we've failed. We failed to set out to do the exact thing that we were supposed to do. And we failed because if we had succeeded, none of this would be happening. We wouldn't have Nazis just fucking openly doing Nazi salutes on the streets. Or in Portugal, the leader of the third most powerful party right now after the elections openly doing Nazi salutes. What the fuck is going on? There's clearly been, the left is a little bit asleep. And of course, this is due to Red Scare propaganda. Again, as I said in the beginning of the episode, that's why I said it, regarding just capitalist governments making sure that these leftist movements don't exist. That either be through propaganda or through just the changing, and creating social democratic style material conditions, which allows us to have a sort of false consciousness and have this idea that, oh yeah, problems are being solved and that there's no need for there to be leftist movements. It's generally that. It's generally those ideas brought together which have caused the left to basically dwindle and lose any power, because people kind of felt like there was no need for it anymore. And it wasn't like a conscious decision, but we just died off. And that's horrible. So what can we do? That is a question that Alpha put to me last week, and that I very pessimistically said, nothing. Now, that's not true. That is not true. And I said that in a very sort of out of context form, where I didn't really think before I said it, or didn't give the context behind why I gave that answer. Because I was thinking, when I said that, I was thinking fundamentally under the lens of what we were talking about, which is democracy. There is nothing we can do through the liberal democratic means, which is to just go to the vote and vote for a leftist party and hope for the best. That won't work, because it has never worked, and it just makes everything is against it. And if you want to know what I mean by that, watch the last episode if you haven't. Every democratic system that is in the global north, specifically in the West, it has been created to make sure that leftist movements can't rise. And so, no, there's no fucking way that by vote you will do that. I voted this last Sunday. Sunday? Yeah. I went to vote. And I voted for the first time in my life. And I voted for a movement, a leftist party, which is led by a Marxist leader. I did. And we were able to elect, as if we know right now, 5 members in parliament. Is that going to solve anything? No. Can they try to make better conditions? Sure, they can try. But they themselves know that they won't achieve their goals that way. I mean, they're supposed to be Marxists, so I hope they know. Otherwise, they're not real Marxists. But the reality is that is why I gave that answer. That's why I gave that pessimistic answer of like, no, there's nothing we can do. Because I was thinking in that context, and I guess I didn't really make it clear, because I also was I thought about it, and I don't know why I didn't do it. That's just simply put, I don't know why I did it. Because as I said before, when I talked about democracy, if you think that socialism, specifically socialism, can be achieved through democratic means, you are a utopian socialist. This is, I kind of hinted at it in the last episode, and I'm currently holding the book that I've read which talks about it. It's a book which, yes, will be a series that will be coming out on Politdigm Reads. So if you would like to listen to me reading this book, but it's called Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Frederick Engels, one of the greats, one of the fathers of Marxism, alongside Marx himself, of course, where he talks about these several occurrences throughout the 18th, even I think 18th and 19th century, of these small sort of socialist, people who had socialist ideas, who wanted to apply them in small examples, and they succeeded temporarily. They had some success, but they never went anywhere. And Engels puts them as utopian socialists which aren't analyzing society in a scientific way, and the scientific way that Marxists use is historic materialism. That is the method that is used to define how to achieve socialism scientifically. And that's the difference that he puts between a utopian socialist and a scientific socialist. I've been a utopian socialist. Technically speaking, I've been a utopian socialist for the largest period of my life. And only recently have I started reading books like this one and read the Communist Manifesto, or read Yanis's book, or have been also reading other Marxist books, like books by Marx himself or by Rosa Luxemburg, etc. I've myself been trying to become a scientific socialist, somebody who can look at the material conditions of the world and realize that, look, it's not through rigged democratic systems that we're going to achieve socialism. It's not. I mean, there is the democratic socialist parties and movements, and there are democratic socialist people, which is not to be confused with social democrats. Different thing. So a democratic socialist is somebody who wants to achieve socialism through purely democratic means, and that is basically a utopian socialist. Sure, a much modern version of it, but the modern form of the utopian socialist is a democratic socialist because it's not possible, kinda. And I talk about this in the article. I talk about how in the Western part of the world, in the West, that's not possible. It's not. It isn't. But in other parts of the world, where the material conditions are in the right place, where capitalism doesn't have the grasp it has, socialism can be achieved democratically. However, as I put it in the last episode, kind of in a very, I don't know, what's the word? I guess, I don't remember the term right now, but in a very sassy way, I'd say, is that, sure, there's been many countries which have democratically achieved socialism. They have. However, in modern times, usually those countries end up being completely decimated by the United States of America. It's something that I mentioned in the last episode and something that we've talked about a lot. And if you want to know more about that, search up, the several coups, the coup d'etats that have been put in place by the U.S. because a socialist government was a real socialist party was put in government, and they were actually going to, through democratic means, achieve socialism. Instantly, a capitalist power comes in and undermines their democratic means. So does that say that, is it impossible to achieve socialism through democracy? No and yes. No, it can be done. It has been done, but it was very short-lived because that democracy was then completely obliterated. And so suddenly it doesn't matter anymore. So yes and no. But mostly no. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, no. It should be possible. It should be. But it's clear that the capitalist countries, the global north, specifically the West, does not want that to happen. And so it will enforce its rule on those countries to make sure that it never happens. So it's not easy. It's not something that I can just be like, oh yeah, yes it is. It's not possible. But again, the material conditions, even when in a country secluded, it is perfect to have democratic socialism. When other countries are, enforcing their own rule, their own law on those countries, then suddenly, there is no democracy to exist, and then that's fucked. Then everything is fucked. Yeah, as I said before, to kind of close off this part of the article, the important thing to actually achieving socialism is to know how, is to understand these things that I just explained, is to understand that, yes, hypothetically, socialism can be achieved through democratic means. The issue is that either the democratic system makes it impossible, or if the democratic system does make it possible, then there's outsiders which will interfere with this system. And you need to understand this. You need to have this knowledge. You need to study this. You need to study historic materialism. You need to have an understanding of these things in place to be a scientific socialist, aka a Marxist. And you need to to read, to do all these things, and it's hard, and I've been doing my best at that, and that's been the number one thing that I've been doing since January of this year, is to make sure that I can be the best scientific socialist that I can be, not be as utopian or as gullible or as sort of to say that, oh, I shouldn't be as optimistic is not correct, but to be realistic, not be like, oh yeah, everything will be perfect if we just vote. No, that's not true. Voting clearly isn't enough. If it was, then we wouldn't be in the situation that we are. That's just a fact. But anyways, now that we are, it's been an hour and we're coming to the conclusion of the article. I did something in the article which I don't think I've ever done before, which is break the fourth wall and talk about me as an individual. Me and Alpha write these articles almost as if we are one being, one homogeneous being, some sort of morbid fusion between me and him. But the reality is that in this article, I decided to break the fourth wall and address what happened. And I think that in the last episode there was a clear miscommunication, and a part of me is very sad that Alpha couldn't be here today. I hope that he has the time to listen to this episode, and hopefully he does, and I'll push him to do so. But I hope that this episode was able to clarify our miscommunication, and most importantly, I feel like I made this episode more for Alpha than anybody else, to try to clarify what I meant. And I'm sure that there will be other questions that he will put forth to me because of this episode, and we'll keep debating and keep learning with each other and keep each other, and pushing each other to learn more and to teach each other more. And that's good. That's good. It's good to have these moments of like, oh shit, I fucked up, and trying to explain this thing and to push each other to learn more and to become more knowledgeable. It's a good thing. It's actually healthy competition in that sense. Not what capitalism does, however. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself, capitalism. But yeah, we make mistakes, and that happens. And again, I created Politdigm with the intention to, make a difference. As I said in the beginning of the episode, there's a clear need for leftist movements to exist. And I created Politdigm with the idea of this being a sort of company / movement / fucking, I don't know, content creation. I don't know. Politdigm is a lot of things, and Politdigm can be very dynamic in that sense. And I want Politdigm to be a lot of things. I want to make content. I want to be on the streets rallying. I want to be going on television, debating people. I want to create an amazing team of people, a true group, a family, which we all, have Marxist ideas, and that we can all come together and hopefully, contribute to a better world, even if our contribution is minuscule. As I've put it many, many times through the lens of dialectic materialism, and specifically dialectics and Engels's dialectics. These are small changes which together can have a big change, a big difference. And that is what I want to do. That is what I want to be. I just want to be this small change, this small cog in a socialist movement, in a global socialist movement, one which will one day truly achieve global socialism, and that together we can hopefully achieve a sort of utopic not capitalism, a utopic communism, not socialism. But the reality is that, as I said before, to do that, I have had to learn. I have had to teach myself to be able to be part of that larger global, that international Marxist movement. And the reality is that when I created Politdigm, I was very much still a utopian socialist. I very much still fit that criteria. And I have changed. I have moved on. I have learned. And of course, I've always tried to push Alpha along with me. And he himself has learned a lot, through having to do research. And together we have learned a lot. And Politdigm will keep changing and morphing and altering our views. And once in a while, I always have to update our website with new information about our beliefs, about what we believe in, about what we fight for. And in the beginning, I was scared, to be honest, to put on our website to say, we are Marxists, period. I was afraid to say that. And now I have said that we are Marxist. Politdigm is a Marxist movement and an organization and fucking all these different words, big words. And I did this all, as I said a few minutes ago, because I wanted to create a better future for not only me, but the generations ahead. And we've come to a point in our history where a definitive, yeah, I think that's the correct word, moment is coming up, like a tipping point, which will decide how life will be. And to kind of showcase this, I quoted loosely. I kind of changed up the quote a little bit to take out a bit of I had to take out a bit of the context to make the phrase make more sense in my context, I guess. But I can read the full quote from Yannis's book. This is available on the last, or the part where I read this is available on the last episode or the 7th episode, sorry, of the series on Politdigm Reads. So if you want to read the entire chapter, or if you want to not read, listen to, if you want to listen to the entire chapter, or specifically listen to the entire book, which is what I recommend, I suggest you do so. But Yannis is basically talking about technology and the influence of technology. And he says, we are fast approaching a fork in the road where our path will lead either to a world resembling Star Trek, where machines help us improve ourselves, or to a dystopia like The Matrix, in which humans are merely the fuel that powers an empire of machines. The most people, I am sure, barbarism, climate Armageddon. The Matrix seems much more likely than any good outcome. Then again, whenever people thought good outcomes were guaranteed, I am thinking of your comrades in the... Okay, then I'm not going to keep reading it because you need context for that. But that's something, it's what he puts there, or what I wrote in the article, which I put it as, we are fast approaching a fork in the road where our path will lead to either a world resembling Star Trek, a utopian communist space future where machines help us improve ourselves, or to a barbaric climate Armageddon. That's how I put it in the article. And I wanted to first read the entire part of the book so that you had context and you understood that I wasn't taking him out of context to serve my own purpose. But that's a very important and fundamental part of this, to understand this, is that yes, we are currently at a fork of our existence, where we will have to make a choice collectively, where we will have to rise up. And whatever happens, there's going to be a lot of people with different opinions, and we're going to go in all sorts of directions. And having a collective and grouped up, a collective and strong left, a Marxist left, because there's a lot of left, but let's not fuck that. Not even a Marxist left, a left, a strong left, a true left, which wants to achieve socialism, and then of course, communism in the long run. We need to be together. We need to be united, and we need to fight against capitalism, because it is clear that throughout the history of capitalism, that capitalism is not stable and never was and it never will be. And people like Giannis even point out that specifically that capitalism might already even be dead, and that we've replaced it with something that's so much worse, so much more barbaric. And in fact, he even puts forth the idea that there's a book by Rosa Luxemburg, which I intend to read on the Politdigm Reads series, which is Socialism or Barbarism. And he puts forth the idea that we chose barbarism, that techno-feudalism, the system that the current economic system that he says has replaced capitalism, and I agree with him, although I still say capitalism for basically just out of just simplifying the conversation. But assuming that today we have techno-feudalism rather than capitalism, the reality is that we are currently at the worst point of the capitalism, or that currently techno-feudalism is way worse, and that we've replaced it with something which is so barbaric, and that that the system, that the system is even more unstable, that it's doomed to fall, basically. It's completely unreasonable, and that this system will not last long, he thinks, and I have to agree. And to answer Alpha's question this time, to truly answer, what can we do? What can the left do to combat all this? And my answer is not a manual. It's not a fucking manual. I'm not going to say, we need to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. No, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows. So I can't make a plan predicting everything and say that we have to follow all these steps. That's impossible. That's literally impossible. But what we need is to have the tools to be able to come up with a plan on the go, to have a plan that is dynamic and ever changing, and which will allow us to achieve our goals. And most importantly, the left has to be reborn, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. And that's the most corniest shit I've ever said on this podcast, and I will keep it in. But we need to educate each other. We need to create movements like Politdigm. I want more Politdigms to exist. I want as many Politdigms to exist. I don't care. I'm not a liberal fucking goon which is obsessed with competition. No, I don't care about competition, because if other movements like Politdigm rise, and I'm sure they will, and I'm sure there are others like Politdigm which I am not even aware exist, I want them to rise. If Politdigm doesn't succeed, I want them to succeed. Because if we all have the same purpose, then I'm happy. Then I succeeded. I still succeeded in my eyes. And that is what is important. We need to educate each other. We need to collect, to be together. We need to fight for our freedom, for our rights, and we need to have collective action again. The left has to rise from this weird slumber that we entered at the end of the last century, and we need to rise. We need to demand that the capitalists listen to our voices. We need to make them afraid. We need to make them afraid that we are willing to take their power away, because they do not deserve it, and they are as deserving of the power they have as we are, and that power needs to be separated, needs to be what's the word? Damn it, I was doing so well. Needs to be spread throughout us, and that there's nobody on earth which is more valuable objectively than anybody else. And if that person is more valuable, or for some reason should be given extra benefits for some reason, it should be the entire the majority, it should be through democratic ways that we choose to do so. And that person has no right to auto-declare them, to declare themselves to be any better, and to steal what is rightfully ours from them, from us to them. Words. I know English. Trust me. We need to not settle for low goals, to simply allow them to throw these supposed achievements of rights into our faces and for us to accept them, because they are not enough. We should not let these small wins stop us. We should not do that, because that has happened in the past. These small wins should just be a warning for what is to come, for what we truly want, which is the downfall of capitalism or techno-feudalism or whatever the fuck it is, which is oppressing us. No oppressive system should be present. And the reality is that it all depends on us, on the left that is still active and wants to fight. Because the future depends on it. It does. And that is literally the last words I have on this article, which is it's time to abolish capitalism and concentrated wealth altogether, once and for all. The future depends on it. It depends on revolutionaries and not revisionists. And that's, again, an ode to the utopians versus the scientifics, because revisionism does not work. Not in the long run. It works in the short run, sure, for small achievements, for the small achievements we've been talking about, it does. But in the long run, to truly achieve socialism, to truly have global change, to be able to truly fight against the climate crisis that we have, to truly emancipate women, to truly make sure that we have equal rights for all human beings, capitalism must fall. And that's the last words I'll say. And actually, no, I have to say one thing, which is that for capitalism to fall, we need to be revolutionary and not revisionists. That's what I meant to say. Sorry, I fucked it up. But yeah, we need to put aside our revisionist tendencies and realize that we need a straight up revolution, man. And I hope that it's the most peaceful revolution that there can be. Because nobody deserves to die on either side. Nobody, no life deserves to be sacrificed for any movement. None. You should not sacrifice yourself, and you should not sacrifice anybody else's life for a cause. Nobody deserves to die. But I am not so hopeful that the right, the one we are the system that we are trying to abolish, that those who protect it will have that same vision that nobody should die. Because let's be real, they won't. They have never had, and they probably won't have the next time. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was a weird one. I was alone. I had absolutely nobody to talk to. I had no pushback from Alpha, which is also good to keep me in check. It's good for me to keep him in check. It's good to keep each other in check. So I hope that I didn't screw up and say anything that I'll regret in the future. I probably will, but fuck, who knows? You'll always regret something in the future, and you'll only regret the things that you did and not the things that you didn't do. Is that the saying, or is it the opposite? You'll definitely regret the things you didn't do, and the things that you did, you can't go back. You can't undo them. You can only make up for the mistakes you made and become better, change. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure to support us over on Patreon. If you can support us on Patreon, check out our website. Check out how you can support us through other non-monetary means. As I said in the beginning of the episode, that is a much more helpful way to support us, because we are looking for people who can help us edit videos, who can help us make new type of content. And of course, we're always looking for people to join the team in general. So, and that's to us all support. As much as, sure, we could use money to pay for an editor or other stuff like that, we much more value non-monetary support than actual monetary support. But anyways, also don't forget to join the Discord server. You can talk to us, me and Alpha, and whoever joins the server. You can have conversations with us. You can suggest topics for us to talk about. You can debate us. You can do a lot of things. So make sure to join that. And of course, if you do that and also happen to support us on Patreon, you can submit questions to our podcast Q&A. We don't have any questions today. Pardon me. Sorry. So yeah, no questions for today. And of course, to finish it off, the last thing that I have to plug is, of course, oh my God, sorry, I'm burping so much. I apologize. I'm sorry. That's not on purpose. I swear. But yeah, support us on our social media platforms. Keep up to date with the newest news. Of course, if you join Discord, we'll also keep you up to date. So do whatever you want. Join our Discord. Follow us on social media. We have no preference. Just support us, okay? We want to make a difference, and every person counts, and every person that's by our side is welcomed, and we want you to be part of our movement. We want you to be part of Politdigm, even if it's just as a fan, just as somebody who sits in the sidelines and cheers us on. That is something that we appreciate and something that we want, because I mean, it motivates us. It keeps us going. It keeps us with a feeling that yes, we are doing something, and so you can do that. With that being said, that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoy this episode once more, and I'll see you all in the next episode. And let's hope that Alpha comes back from his totally not stealing a bank heist in a non-disclosed country. And what's happening? I wasn't supposed to tell that to anybody. Anyways, goodbye, everybody. I don't know what I'm saying. What am I doing with my life? Seriously.